Good evening, and welcome back to Moonlight Stories, a quiet place for legends, gentle wonder, and deep rest. If this story helps you soften into sleep, please subscribe, tap like, and leave a comment with what you'd love to hear next. Wolves, mermaids, gods, forgotten cities, or any myth you miss. Tonight, we're entering a legend where the night is not empty. It is watched over. This is the story of the wolf who walks between dreams. Chapter 1. When the world was still learning its own name, before roads, before borders, before clocks insisted on counting, there was a world that felt fresh like stone, still warm from being shaped, like water still remembering the first time it learned to move. In that early hush, the land did not yet belong to anyone. It simply was, wide, patient, and listening. And in that listening world, the Creator formed a human being, original man, not to dominate the earth, but to live within it, as a relative lives within a family, not above, not below, among. Original man opened his eyes into a sky that did not yet carry the weight of stories. The clouds moved slowly. The wind tasted clean. The rivers ran without any fear of being named. He stood, and the world stood with him quietly, as if it had been waiting. But a human heart, even at the beginning of things, can feel a certain loneliness. Not the sharp kind, the soft kind. The kind that comes when you are surrounded by beauty and still wish you had someone beside you to say, "Do you see it too?" The Creator understood this. And so, the Creator placed another being into the world, Maingan, the wolf. Not a monster, not a warning, a brother spirit, a companion, a teacher whose lessons would arrive the way moonlight arrives without force, but impossible to ignore. Wolf did not rush toward original man. He did not perform. He simply appeared at a distance, standing in tall grass with the steady posture of a being who has always belonged. Original man looked at him, and the fear that humans sometimes carry in their bones had not yet been invented. There was no old terror in the blood, only recognition. Wolf blinked once, slow, calm. And in that blink was a message. You are not alone. They began to walk together, not as master and animal, not as owner and owned, but as two beings placed into the same breathing world, two relatives moving through the same dawn. Days passed in a way that did not count itself. They crossed rivers that shone like long thoughts. They climbed hills that lifted them into wind, so clean it felt like medicine. They watched birds lift and fall through the sky, as if the air were soft enough to hold them. And the more they walked, the more Original Man realized something simple and huge. The world was not silent. It was speaking, not with words yet, but with presence, with rhythm, with small changes of light and shadow, with the way the earth warmed under sun and cooled under stars, with the way water never repeated the same shape twice. Wolf seemed to understand this language instinctively. He paused when the land needed pausing. He moved when movement was right. He listened always, even when nothing obvious could be heard. At night, when they slept, Original Man dreamed without knowing the word dream. He drifted into dark softness, and in that softness he sensed a wide place that was not exactly the world, and not exactly not world. And in those early nights, he noticed something strange. Wolf was not only beside him in waking life. Wolf was there in that other place too, moving silently through the edges of sleep, circling the boundaries like a guardian of something delicate. Original Man did not understand it, but his spirit did. Something in him relaxed deeper whenever Wolf was near, as if Wolf could walk where humans could not, as if Wolf knew how to travel between the visible and the unseen without tearing either one. And slowly, so slowly, it felt like the turning of a season. Original Man began to realize what this companionship truly was. Wolf was not just a creature of fur and breath. Wolf was a bridge between the world that is touched by hands and the world that is touched by dreams. Chapter 2: The Journey of Naming. One day, after they had walked long enough for their footprints to feel like part of the land's memory, the Creator called to them, not like a shout, more like a knowing that arrived inside the chest. There was work to do, because a world without names is beautiful, yes, but it is also unfinished. A name is not a cage. A true name is a relationship. It is a way of saying, I see you, I recognize you, you belong. So, Original Man and Wolf wolf began the great task. They walked the earth and gave names to creation. They did not sit with lists. They did not rush to label. They listened first. They listened to a river until they understood whether it was playful or solemn. They watched a tree until they felt if its spirit was quiet or bold. They followed tracks until they learned the difference between hunger and curiosity. And then, only then, did the names arrive like birds landing gently on a branch. When they came to the deer, Wolf's ears lifted. He watched the animal with an attention that was not predatory but respectful. Deer moved like a prayer through the brushlight, quick, alive. Original man felt a name rise in him that carried the sound of soft hooves and breath. He spoke it, and the deer seemed to accept it, not as ownership, but as acknowledgement. When they came to the bear, the air thickened with ancient strength. Bear did not hurry. Bear did not apologize for existing. The forest around it seemed to stand a little taller. Wolf lowered his head slightly, not in submission, but in respect. And original man understood. Some beings are not meant to be rushed, even with language. So they waited. When the name finally came, it arrived like a drumbeat. They named the winds. They named the stones that held heat. They named the birds that carried songs across distances. And everywhere they went, the world grew more complete. But the journey was not only naming, it was learning. Because as they traveled, original man began to see how Wolf moved through life, not single-minded, not greedy, not careless. Wolf was family-minded. Wolf was watchful. Wolf did not take more than he needed. Wolf did not hunt for pleasure. Wolf hunted for balance. And in that, Wolf became a teacher, not through speeches, through example. Original man learned to look at the horizon and ask, not what can I get, but what belongs here? What does the world need from me? Sometimes, when the night was clear, they would stop and watch the stars. The sky would open like a great dark lake above them, and the stars would glitter like tiny fires that never burned out. On those nights, original man felt again that strange other place, the dream place hovering just behind the edge of waking. Wolf would lift his head and look at the sky as if listening to something far beyond hearing. And then Wolf would howl. Not a scream, not a threat. A long, steady sound that rose and fell like breath. The forest would go still. Even the wind seemed to pause. Original man felt the howl move through him, through bone and heart, until it reached a quiet place inside where fear could not live. He understood then, without words, that Wolf's voice was not only for other wolves. It was for the world itself. A reminder, a signal, a thread tying waking to dreaming, earth to sky, creature to creator. And in that moment, original man knew something he would carry forever. Wolf was not only walking beside him on the land. Wolf was also walking beside him on the invisible paths that run through sleep. Chapter 3: The Crossing on the Ice. There is a moment in many old teachings where the world tests a bond not to break it, but to reveal it. For original man and wolf, that moment came in winter. The river froze, wide and shining beneath a pale sky. Ice covered it like a sheet of glass. Snow fell lightly, soft as ash. The air was so cold it tasted sharp. They stepped onto the river because the crossing was the simplest path forward. At first, the ice held. Their footsteps made small sounds, subtle cracks, quiet sighs. The river underneath moved, but far below, like a thought not yet spoken. Original man and wolf walked side by side, and original man spoke about the names they had given, about the way the world was changing as it grew more known. Wolf listened, as he always did, but his ears flicked once. A warning. Original man did not notice. He was mid-thought, mid-wonder. And then the ice changed. A thin line appeared, almost nothing. A hairline fracture. A quiet betrayal. Before original man could step back, the ice broke. Cold water swallowed him in one sudden, shocking rush. It stole his breath. It seized his body like claws made of winter. He flailed, trying to find the edge, trying to lift himself out, but the ice crumbled under his hands. The river did not hate him. It was simply the river. It moved. It did what it was. Original man's mind flashed with panic, new, sharp, unfamiliar. He had never nearly died before. He had never felt the world refuse him. On the ice above, Wolf stood still. And in that stillness was a decision, not a simple one. To help is to bind yourself. To rescue is to promise. To save another being is to accept that their fate will be woven into yours. Wolf stepped forward. He lowered his body, careful, testing the ice with weight and instinct. He did not rush, because rushing would break the world further. Original man's fingers were numb. His strength was slipping away. He looked up, and in his eyes was something like pleading, raw and honest. Wolf reached the edge and turned, presenting his tail and his strong body, offering purchase, offering a way. Original man grasped. Wolf pulled. It took effort. It took time. It took a kind of strength that was not loud. It was the strength of endurance, the strength of doing what must be done without needing applause. Slowly, painfully, Wolf dragged original man from the water onto the ice, and then onto the bank, where snow lay clean and untouched. Original man lay there, gasping, shaking, alive. Wolf stood over him, breath steaming in the cold air. And in that moment, the bond between them deepened into something permanent, not because it was convenient, because it had been tested. Original man looked up at Wolf, and the gratitude in him was so large it could not become words. Wolf met his gaze calmly, as if to say, "This is what we do for family." They stayed there until original man's shaking slowed, until warmth returned in small increments, until the world steadied again. Then they rose and continued the journey. But from that day onward, original man walked with a new understanding. Wolf did not travel with him because the Creator simply wanted company. Wolf traveled with him because the world needs relationships that are strong enough to survive the ice breaking beneath them. Chapter 4: Brothers of the Earth. The journey continued, naming, learning, listening, until the world felt less like a blank page and more like a living story. Original man and wolf walked so far that the seasons changed around them like slow music. They became close in a way that cannot be forced. close in the way of shared silence, shared danger, shared wonder. They were, as the teaching says, like brothers. They learned the paths of animals and the moods of weather. They learned where berries grew sweetest and where the wind turned sharp. They learned the kind of knowledge that is not written down, the kind that lives in the body. And with every step, the world became more fully itself. But there is a truth that arrives in every deep relationship. Sometimes love does not mean staying together forever. Sometimes love means accepting separation without betrayal. The Creator called to them again, not harshly, but with that same inner certainty. It was time. Original man and wolf stood together beneath a wide sky. The air felt quiet in a new way, thick with meaning. Original man looked at wolf and felt something tighten in him, an instinctive refusal. No, not this, not separation, but the Creator spoke a teaching that would echo through generations. Their paths must separate, not because the bond was broken, because the bond was meant to stretch across distance, because wolf had a role that could not be fulfilled if he stayed always beside human footsteps. Because humans would need to learn something that is hard to learn. How to live without controlling. How to respect without possessing. How to remember kinship, even when kinship does not live inside your house. The Creator told them something else, something heavy and prophetic. What happens to one will also happen to the other. They would both be feared, respected, misunderstood. They would both be judged by those who did not understand their nature. Original man felt grief rise in him like a tide. Wolf lowered his head slightly, not in sadness exactly, but in acceptance. Wolf had always understood the shape of things. Original man stepped closer. He wanted to touch Wolf, to hold him back by sheer will. But Wolf looked at him with steady eyes. And in those eyes was a message older than speech. We are still connected, even when we cannot walk side by side. Even when the world tries to make you forget. Wolf turned then, not dramatically, simply turned, and he walked away into the trees, into the wild, into the deep places where humans rarely go. Original man watched until wolf became shadow. He expected the world to feel empty, but it didn't, because the bond did not vanish. It changed form from companionship into something broader, a relationship between peoples, a relationship between humans and wolves, a relationship between waking and dreaming. That night, original man slept, and in his dreams he heard wolves howl again, far away but unmistakable. And he understood. Wolf could still find him, even in sleep, even across distance, because Wolf was learning how to walk the paths humans could not see. Chapter 5. The Wolf who walks between dreams. As time passed, more humans came into the world. Families, villages, fires, stories. People learned to plant, to hunt, to sing, to build. They learned joy and loss. They learned that life is tender. And they learned something else too. Night can be heavy, because when the sun leaves, the mind becomes louder. The past returns. Fear tries to find a place to sit. Regret stirs. Questions rise like smoke. In those nights, people began to notice the presence of wolf. Not always close, often at the edge. A shape moving through moonlit snow. A shadow passing between trees. A pair of eyes reflecting starlight. Some people feared him, because fear is easy when you do not understand. But others, those who still remembered the old teaching, felt something different. Reverence. They remembered that Wolf was not just a hunter. He was a relative, a teacher, a being placed here for a reason. And in the quiet hours before sleep, elders told children, Wolf listens, Wolf watches, Wolf keeps the world in balance. And then, softly, Wolf can also walk where we walk only in dreams. Because people began to notice something strange and comforting. When Wolf was near, nightmares softened. Children who woke screaming began to wake less often. Hunters who carried heavy memories slept more deeply. Grief did not disappear, but it became easier to hold. It was as if Wolf's presence, whether physical or spiritual, reminded the body, you are not alone in the dark. In some tellings, people said the howls were messages to the spirits. In others, they said the howl was a thread tying the world together, earth to sky, living to unseen. And in the gentlest telling, the one spoken when someone needed sleep, Wolf did not howl to frighten. Wolf howled to guide, because there are paths in the night, not physical ones, though those exist too, but inner ones, paths through the mind, paths through memory, paths through fear. And Wolf, who had always listened to the world's rhythm, could sense when a human spirit wandered too far into darkness. So Wolf walked. He walked through the places humans could not see. He walked through the thin space between dream and waking. He walked the borderlands of sleep, where a mind can tip into panic or drift into peace. He did not speak like a human. He did not preach. He simply moved steady, sure like a guardian. And those who were sensitive, those like original man had been sensitive, sometimes felt him, a warmth at the edge of a nightmare, a calm arriving suddenly, a sense of being escorted back towards safety. They would wake with tears on their faces and not know why, only that something had helped them. They would whisper into the dark, "Thank you." And somewhere, far beyond the village fires, Wolf would lift his head under the stars. His eyes would look like small constellations, and he would continue his quiet work, walking between worlds, between dreams, between the visible and the unseen, because that is what he had been placed here to do, to show the way. Chapter 6. A Night, Guardian's Promise. There is a reason this teaching remains alive, because it carries not only wonder, but responsibility. It says, you cannot harm Wolf without harming something in yourself. You cannot erase the wild without erasing a part of your own spirit. And it says, too, when humans forget how to listen, the world becomes unbalanced. When humans take too much, the land grows tired. When humans treat relatives as enemies, fear multiplies. wolf in the teaching becomes a mirror showing humans what they have lost and what they could remember again: patience, family, cooperation, endurance, respect, and the prophecy that what happens to one happens to the other, moves through history like a low drum. But tonight, in this quiet retelling meant for sleep, you do not have to carry the heaviness of history. Tonight, you only need the gentle part, that the night is not empty, that there is a guardian presence in the world, whether you believe it literally, spiritually, or simply as a symbol that your mind understands. A steady creature moving through moonlight, a quiet watcher at the edge of fear, a being who knows the way back to calm. So if your thoughts feel loud tonight, imagine this: a wide, dark forest under a sky full of stars, snow or grass beneath soft moonlight. And somewhere beyond the reach of your worry, a wolf walking slowly, not hunting, not chasing, only patrolling. His paws make almost no sound. His breath is visible for a moment, then gone. His eyes hold the quiet brightness of distant stars. And as he walks, your mind begins to follow his rhythm, step by step, breath by breath, thought by thought, loosening. The wolf circles once, twice, 3 times around the edges of your restless mind. And slowly, without force, the inner world softens, because you are being guided, not into anything dramatic, not into anything frightening, only into rest, only into the gentle place where dreams can unfold without harm. And if, in the middle of the night, you wake for a moment, if you feel the world too large, the silence too sharp, remember, some relatives walk beside us, even when we cannot see them. Some guardians work quietly at the edge of our awareness. And sometimes, if you listen very carefully, you might sense it, a calm passing through you like a breeze through trees, as if Wolf has just walked by, between dreams, between worlds. And then, just as quietly, you drift back into sleep,